Hi, I'm Marius
And I'm Tamara Jones.
and we welcome you very, very warm to our first episode of our podcast.
Yeah.
So, I think it's an amazing opportunity when we talk about the industry, talk about the past 4 years, which had a huge impact on all of us.
Yes. So we're thinking what better episode to start everything off with than to really dive into the changes that's occurred since the pandemic in this entertainment industry.
Yeah, so everything actually happens exactly 4 years ago. It was April, May that whole our industry was shut down.
Yeah. Tough times.
And then a few months later, there was a little bit light in the tunnel, and some production they start to shoot everything remotely.
Yeah, I noticed a lot of commercials were starting to shoot first. And then slowly,
Some
towards the
episodic,
end.
but some episodics, right? And you remember
Yeah.
when they hired the couple, they didn't hire like strangers. You had to be either married couple or partners.
Oh, yeah, I
And
remember
then
that.
they can work without the mask, and then actually they have some
Yep.
intimate scenes, right?
Yep,
The kissing
yep.
or whatever. But obviously, and another thing which probably everybody forgot about that, it was the whole vaccination thing, right? You cannot go to the set, and that was we're talking the months later.
Yeah, well, first before the vaccination, there was those PCR or it was like the test.
Right.
The first test was horrible because they stuck this tube up your nose to the back of your throat. The worst experience ever by far of the pandemic for me. But yeah,
And we
and
had
then
to took them a lot, especially I remember as well when I have to go to another country, then obviously there's no way you can get away without this test, right?
yeah, the test, and then later the next year, they decided you would have to get a
The
vaccination.
vaccine. And that's the whole thing started as far as the actors and acting. So you not only have to be tested, but you also have to show vaccination, not one. Whatever happened, the second one, and then another one. Yeah, that was very bad for a lot of actors, right?
It was like the first wave of dropping out of this industry for a lot of different people, because it was just such a crazy time. And I think that it was scary too. I mean,
Yeah,
a
it
lot of
was.
people just were like, I think some people were even just afraid to be around sets because they're like, well, goodness, if you're mandating and all of this stuff, then like, is it Armageddon?
Yeah, and there was another group among my clients that they couldn't have be vaccinated because the immune system they didn't allow them. So if they were vaccinated, then they probably get even worse than normally.
Yeah.
So they were just from the beginning already scratched from the work.
Yeah. So that was like the first wave.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then everything on set changed and just it was so crazy. They had different zones. They had a zone A, they had a zone B, they had a zone
And
C.
everything ruled by the obviously union, right?
Yes, everything, and they added another department to productions, which was like the CDC run department. It was like
Which
the health,
cost more money,
which
obviously.
It tapped on 25% on average to any production budget.
And we forgot about that. But then anybody who wants to produce any films, they know how expensive everything is. So here we have on the top of everything 25% of your budget going to CDC, right?
Yeah, but I will say, I didn't, not that I saw too many people doing it, but in the independent industry, the independent film industry, the independent entertainment industry is the Wild West. And so those type of mandates weren't, I mean, if it was a non-union project, it just wasn't something considered. And a lot of people weren't doing that. Now, were they gathering, because at that time you couldn't gather like beyond a certain crowd. They weren't gathering in large droves to shoot projects, but that they did technically, you could have gone under the radar shooting a project independently without tagging on
Right.
that. But no one wanted to do it because a lot of people were still so afraid during that time.
Yeah, and that probably
So-
takes what, the first 2 years, right? 2020 to
2021, I would say it was like
the worst.
it was when people could have gone under the radar in the independent industry for sure. Yeah. And so that, that was very stressful because that increase in budget, that stressful space, you had to do tests too. So that was another thing, is that on sets, on your tier one and up, which is like you're getting into the real high budget professional mainstream industry, you had to do tests like 3 times a week.
Yeah.
And
you
had to test
could
everybody.
be okay actually the first two tests, right? Then you enter to the set and suddenly you were tested positive, and that's it.
And then the whole set would shut down. That was another thing. So you had to test the whole entire crew, the whole entire, everybody that was working on that production. They all had to be tested 3 times a week. And if anyone did test positive, the whole set would shut down. I mean,
for
wow.
at least 2 weeks, right?
It would just be until they can figure out to trace it. So when they could figure out to trace it and to see who got it, it would be shut down for like a couple of days. And man, it was just, I don't even know how, well, a lot of money was left. And we're getting to that point because this didn't just, go away. This wasn't something that had no impact at all. It had a huge impact.
Yeah, and that was one side of the story. Another, how many people we lost actually in this whole period of the COVID. How many actors passed away.
Oh, wow.
And that was very scary. And this list is actually very, very long.
Wow. Yeah, I think, it's like you were dealing with deaths for various causes. And it was just such a crazy time. And so that was like the first wave. And then we started getting into them relaxing on those restrictions and making it more like a regular thing. It was like more regulated at that point, so it wasn't as crazy. It was like it went down to, I believe, once or twice a week that you had to do your tests, and then everybody still had to be. It was still mandated that people had to be vaccinated. And then what?
I think we should also mention that if you were tested and you were tested negative and was okay, and then suddenly you were tested positive, then you were scratched from the cast, right? And you didn't get a penny.
You didn't.
You get the money for the testing, but the bookings were completely out, so you didn't get paid for anything at this point.
That's another point, actually. So another cost was that if everybody who did get tested, you're not really you can't work on the day that you're tested because they have to make sure that you're not testing positive. So you got paid for that day. And so that was another extra cost, another extra expense for productions of like, you had to pay a whole nother day for everyone on these test days.
Right. But then when you're going to actually to be on a set, and then you tested positive, then you were completely scratched from the cast. And then didn't give you any money for that.
That's insane.
So we have so many examples that our clients went to the set, they were booked, and then because they were tested positive, they have to hire somebody else.
Wow.
And those people get completely nothing. I mean, yes, they get the money for the tests, and basically nothing else.
Yeah. So like you can only imagine that impact of just being so unsure. You never knew if you were going to be working or not. And people, this is why we mentioned in the trailer, the introduction trailer of this, is that this industry already has a silent stigmatism of mental health illness. Like before all of this, a lot of people, and I won't dive this could be another episode because I could talk like a lot about this. But before this whole thing, you had a lot of people with their own mental health issues, from the most basic being narcissism, serious narcissism, all the way up to like bipolar, schizophrenia, like a lot of different conditions. And now you had this very unstable work environment and, just auditioning environment, work environment, that, it put a lot of people on edge and made their health conditions 10 times worse.
Yeah, and everything actually changed because that was the time that we completely stopped in-person audition, right? We start to create those eco auditions, putting on a tape, which exist like maybe 5%, maybe a little bit more, but majority was in person, right? You had this very personal relationship with the casting office. And then suddenly you're in completely different environment. Some people, they couldn't take it.
It actually, it is very impactful. And it's interesting that you mentioned that, because we definitely want to come back to that when we start to get more into the impacts of every sector of this industry. But yes, that there were actors, performers, myself included, and I'm not the only one, where it took years to build a rapport with certain casting. Like the impact that it had for certain actors, it took years to build a rapport with casting agencies, casting directors that will can call you in so many times that you realize you have a relationship. And that completely went away.
Yeah.
Like completely.
And definitely we'll talk about that in a further episodes too. But the casting directors, some of them, they lost actually the offices, right? Because the whole post-COVID impact was also the whole real estate went so up. Maybe with this a little bit time in between when everything went down and people could rent actually everything cheaper, but that was for what, like just a few months, and then if you were late, that's it. Then you have to pay 3 times more than before.
Yeah, there was a mass exodus out of the Manhattan area of New York, and that's where the great majority of casting agencies were. And the casting department, there is your head CD, your head casting director, and then you have like the ones under. So you have your associate casting director, and then you'll have one even below that, which is assistant casting director. So basically that kind of went away because you really couldn't afford. Everything was just so slow that assistant casting directors practically went away.
And then eventually, when they get back to the whole system, right? Everything was virtually anyway.
It was virtual,
You actually didn't know if you send the email or you call somebody to whom you speak, actually.
Yeah.
Either it was a casting director or associate or assistant.
Yeah.
And that was just beginning, all the changes we have right now.
Yeah. And, and I think that there are interesting ways that actors had to figure out how to do auditions, because you couldn't really just call your friend up or like call anybody up to come meet you, because they were actually encouraging you not to. I mean, for so long, they were like, maybe you shouldn't meet up with people. Like, even though, businesses were open, they were still trying to encourage.
Yeah, I agree. But at the same time, I have to tell you, in let's say 3 years into the COVID, I was amazed by how many actors adjusted amazingly well to the whole system, and that was probably, we're talking about a year, maybe 2 years, right? How they actually prepared very nicely to self-tapes.
Yeah, self-tapes.
So everybody bought the new equipment, new microphones and the backdrop, and everything was done, I would say, pretty professionally.
Yeah.
So yes, you had still those clients who recorded in a room full of the clothes. You can see like what they store in the kitchen, right? But
got their dirty laundry in the background.
Yeah, exactly. But I think majority, they actually pretty well. And obviously they have so many Zoom classes and workshops how to do it online, and some of them, they took advantage of this, and I think they did a pretty good job though.
And so at one point, like 2021, 2022, 2021, 2022, going into 2023, the industry, this COVID industry, kind of regulated. And so people were kind of used to it now, being on set. Everyone had, by the way, it was a little funny. So I didn't even mention the PPE that had to be on sets. Everyone had to wear masks, and not just masks. For some people, they actually had these weird dog collar shields that go over your face. So it was just like, it was just, I don't know, it felt ridiculous. I know that it's very controversial, but the shield with the dog collar with the shield going up over your face felt a little bit like extreme. And I think that that's just, this is if you were outside of zone A.
Right.
All the actors were considered zone A, where they had to wear their protective gear until cameras were rolling. But everybody else, they had to wear that protection. And the only time that they didn't wear that protection is obviously when you break for lunch or when you're just going to catering.
Which were not anymore bars, open bars, tables.
Oh yeah,
where you
open
have
bar,
a lot of
yeah.
food and you can grab whatever you want. That's it. That was the end.
Yeah, everything at this point was containers, to-go containers. Like they packed your lunch, packed whatever. They asked you if you had food restrictions, and they would give you like 3 options, which is, it probably should be that way. Because this industry is gluttonous. But the normal way is having an open bar where you have several different options, and like they have something called a craft service, where you just have snacks and things that are out, but that was also like done. Everything was inside of plastic, inside wrapped up, which was very, very horrible for the environment.
Yeah, and of course, from my time perspective, was this everything really necessary? We don't know at this point, and we don't want to go into the politics.
We will keep it neutral and let history judge it itself. I think that more information comes out every day. And actually at this point, that kind of leads us into it started regulating, and then I believe it was in 2023 when the mandates stopped.
Well, and that was very interesting because I believe in April 2023, finally we were so happy because the union decided to rid of the most drastic requirements,
Yeah.
which of course the test, but mostly vaccination, right? And we're so happy, so finally we can fully get back to the work, and then we were hit.
By this point, before that one, I would say there was a huge reduction in a lot of things. Not just the crew workers and the performers, that was reduced, but also there were a lot of shows. This was like the first wave of a lot of projects being canceled.
Right.
They were just being canceled, or they were being
reduced, even as far as the episodes in a series.
Yeah.
Right. So let's say instead of 12, 10 to 7, 6 episodes. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But my point was that we finally were so happy that we don't have to really worry about the vaccination. And then
Boom.
It happened that everybody expected. WGA went on strike May 1st, and then the following month, second after. But that's something we'll talk in next episode.
Yes. So in the next episode, we'll talk about the second big drastic hit to this industry.
Right.